Let me get started. All right. So this evening we're beginning in Job chapter, hold on just a second. I had it just a second ago. Job chapter 2. We're picking up from we're going to pick up with chapter 2, verse 11 tonight. Just kind of remind ourselves a little bit about what's going on here. Job has suffered. The Bible says in Job chapter 2, God allows him to try Job even that much more, chapter 2, verses 1 through 6. Now what begins to happen is the fact that Job is suffering himself. He's lost his family. He's lost his wealth. His wife, before it's all said and done, is going to be saying, curse God and die. We've talked a lot about the Lord, how he's in charge of Satan, that Satan at the same time is asking leave of God to test Job in this respect. And this is a little peek into heaven. This is a little peek into what's going on in our world today, with Satan using whatever he wants to use to try to cause us to lose the faith, to cause us to fear instead of believe that God is in control. One of the things about Job in all of this situation, as I've looked at it, is the fact he still holds fast his integrity. He's still faithful, even though he's going through these various trials. 1 Peter chapter 1, 6 and 7, that tests the genuineness of your faith, but it's hard to go through those trials whenever you're going through them. And so Satan continues to tell God the only reason that he is doing that is because you're continuing to test him, or you're continuing to take care of him. If you touch him yourself, if you allow him himself to hurt, then he will curse you to your face. So God's allowed Satan to put the boils from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. And again, we've talked about what this possibly could be, the fever, this disease, how he would have looked.
Reference to that and any other scriptures where they talk about boils?
There was one of the plagues, I think, of the Egyptians was boils. And I'm trying to think of, and this is just off the top of my head, okay, but I believe one of the plagues of the Egyptians were boils. So that would have been something they all knew and understood. And again, it's obviously a very, very, very bad skin infection that's popping out all over your body. And again, you have the fever, you have the pain, you have the soreness. And again, if it's over from the very top of your body down to the bottom of your body, then again, you're just in pure misery. Can't move. There's no place you can get comfortable. You can't sleep. No doubt as he's scraping himself with this oozing pus, as I look at it, there'll be flies and everything else around. His wife would have nothing to do with him. You know, I'm serious now.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to picture this stuff as in the very best ways we possibly. Huh?
It's like the Black Plague.
Yeah, and again, he don't go down and get an antibiotic to kill it. He's just having to suffer with it.
What did they do in those days? They didn't have any sort of
They did have some medicinal
like
plants, herbal stuff. I think they would have learned a lot of that from various sources. But again, it wasn't that they go down and get these antibiotics and kill the stuff and go on their merry way. That's not one of the things that that's happening in this situation. So just picture him. Job did not sin with his lips. He did not sin. He did not curse God as Satan had hoped. And the Jewish commentary on this passage emphasizes the ideas that some thoughts possibly entered his head, but he'd actually never said them.
But that wouldn't be sin, though, right? I mean, I think that when something enters your head, it's a moment of temptation, but
right,
you give place to it.
Right, and I think that's part of it as well, and something to think about. And as I said, and this is where we ended last week with the idea of one author wrote that it's easier to lower our view of God than to raise our faith to such height. And that's the challenge for all of us as Christians and everybody else for that matter, that we've got to raise our faith to that height rather than lowering our view of God and saying he is the one doing all of this to me. It becomes easy to blame God. And God obviously, A, can handle it, but B, he knows the truth, so he's not worried about whether we blame God or not. And so the reality is it's not really making that much of a difference.
But I think a lot of reasons why people nowadays blame God for things is because they don't know this kind of stuff.
That's right.
Because Calvinist teaches that God they will just curse one person that does the exact same thing as another person. That's confusing to someone who's not a Christian.
And that's exactly true. And again, does that not identify and help us all to realize that that's what is causing so many problems today with denominationalism and so forth, because we have so many different opinions about it all, and we're not sitting down reading ourselves for what the Bible says. Look here in this situation, did Job curse God? No. Did he suffer? Yes. Did he complain later? Yes. Is complaining wrong? Now, there's going to be some passages in the New Testament that emphasize that we should not murmur. Okay, and we'll talk about some of those as we continue to go through.
You got to open your heart to
God. That's right. You got to open your heart. You got to keep your heart open to what God says. So look at it from all of these things. Think about the idea. Now we're going to pick up tonight with chapter 2, verse 11 through 13. All right. Job 2, beginning in verse 11, and we're going to go through verse 13. All righty. We read here that he says, Job's friends then come to comfort him. And Job has 3 friends. And we're not to suppose that he had only 3 friends, but you've got to realize that they were the ones that come to try to do something to help him.
Yeah.
While we go through the book of Job and while we listen to their arguments, trying to convince Job that he has sinned and trying to get Job to repent of sins, we have to realize that often
we're trying to help.
We try to help, but sometimes we don't. But one thing we can say about these 3 guys here is they came.
Yeah, they showed up.
And they showed up. And so this is extremely, extremely interesting. Job 32 at verse 6 suggests the idea that all of them were probably very old. Obviously, Job may have been very old as well. Listen to what he says. Job 32 at verse 6. He says, so Elihu, the son of Barachel, I am young in years and you are very old. Now, here's another guy that's going to show up a little bit later, and he's going to be the younger guy. He's going to be the guy that has all the answers. And whereas Job and his 3 friends are going to be discussing this and trying to deal with this in the way Job will never even answer Elihu because he's so much younger. Job says, Elihu says, I'm young in years and you are old, very old. Therefore, I was afraid and dared not declare my opinion to you. Elihu goes on and says, I said, age should speak. Multitude of years should teach wisdom. But there's a spirit in man, and the breath of the Almighty gives him understanding. Great men are not always wise, nor do the aged always understand justice. And in that statement, and we're going to revisit it again later when we get there, and we'll talk about it a little bit more, but in that statement, Elihu is right. Just because you're older does not mean you learn, and it does not mean that you have all the answers. But again, sometimes young people think they know all the answers and they've not lived life. Yeah. I think about the idea a lot of times that as you're growing up, you think you know more than your dad. And then you become to the realization whenever you're out there on your own, trying to make ends meet, trying to do what you need to do, you come to find out, well, he's a whole lot smarter than I gave him credit for. Mm-hmm. And the thing is because he's lived life. He's lived life. And so this is the reason why you find a lot of times with the aged is wisdom. But again, some older people don't ever learn.
That's how they look in some society or cultures. The old person, or in the Native Americans, or like the elder person is like who rules the society, and they go talk to them like, what do I do here?
And that's kind of the same situation in this society, specifically if this was the patriarchal age that this is setting in. And, remember I talked about this a couple of weeks ago with the idea that it probably was set in the patriarchal age. So Job and his three friends would have been considered older men, and more people would have come to them for advice than they would have if they had gone to some other younger man. So think about this. They got together. Obviously, they got together. As you're reading the text there again in Job chapter 2, verse 11, again, it emphasizes the idea. When Job's three friends heard of all this adversity, each one came from his own place: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite. They made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. I love that passage. They were going to come. The Bible says they came from their own place. Obviously, they traveled a while to get some distance to get there. And so, again, as you go on in Job chapter 15 at verse 10, it seems to suggest, and notice, did you hear I emphasize the word seems, that these guys are older than Job.
Yeah.
He says there, are you the first man who was born? Here Eliphaz is speaking here. Were you made before the hills? Have you heard the counsel of God? Do you limit wisdom to yourself? What do you know that we do not know? What do you understand that is not in us? The gray-haired and the aged are among us, much older than your father. It seemed to suggest in chapter 15, verse 10, that they may have been older than Job, and even maybe about the same age as Job's father would have been. So that would
friends of his father.
Yeah, friends of his father coming to help him out in this particular circumstance. So it does say a lot about them, their willingness to come and help him, their willingness to at least to listen to what he had to go on through, and to listen through what they was going to say. So let's look at them. First off, there was Eliphaz the Temanite. We read in Genesis chapter 36, verse 11, that he may have been a descendant of Teman. Teman may have been the grandson of Esau. Okay. He may have been an inhabitant of the land Teman settled, a land in a portion of Arabia. And again, you see this phrase again in Genesis 36:42, Jeremiah 48:7 and 8, Ezekiel 25:13.
Say that again.
All right. Genesis 36:42 and 43, Jeremiah 48:7 and 8.
Genesis 46, what?
36:42 and 43. Jeremiah 48:7 and 8. I'm sorry, I'm going too fast.
No, I'm just like.
And then you have Ezekiel 25:13 and Obadiah verses 8 and 9. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49 and verse 7, Jeremiah celebrates the Temanites' wisdom. Let's listen to see what he says here. Jeremiah 49 and verse 7 says, come on now. Against Edom, thus says the Lord, is wisdom no more in Teman? Has counsel perished from the prudent? Has their wisdom vanished? So it seems like that they were well known for their wisdom, celebrated for their wisdom. Notice also against the idea that this emphasizes the idea that Teman may very well have been around Edom. Edomites, we would remember that whole story in that respect. All right. So as you're looking at this, Eliphaz speaks. He may have very well been the oldest one. And then you have the other two speak. Bildad the Shuhite. He may have been a descendant of Shua, Abraham's son by Keturah, Genesis 25, verse 2. Genesis 25, verse 2. This is Bildad the Shuhite. Every time I look at this and read this story, I've always thought about this idea. Years ago, I had a book. I still got it in my library. That's jokes or riddles from the Bible. And the joke was something like this: who was the shortest man in the Bible? And everybody would say Zacchaeus. He was a wee little man. A wee little man was he. Okay, right? I remember singing that whenever I was growing up. And this particular book said, no, it's Bildad the Shuhite. He was only as tall as a shoe. All right. Now, that's going to stick in your mind. But Bildad the Shuhite is the shortest man in the Bible. All righty. So you can take that for what it's worth. I just thought I'd throw that out there to you, and hopefully you'd get a little bit of a laugh out of it. You know what I'm saying? And then you have Zophar the Naamathite. This again was probably the city of Naamah. Joshua 15 verse 41 mentions this city. Some people think that this may have been a descendant of Esau. And if he was a descendant of Esau and the Temanites are descendants of Esau, then you have these group of people that are coming to him from all this in this respect. So the Edomites would have had a big part to play in this discussion with
remind me again, who's Esau? I haven't studied the Old Testament.
Esau, Jacob, and Esau.
Okay.
Sons of Isaac. Right? Remember? Okay.
That's it. That's the Edomites.
The Edomites. His people later become the Edomites. That's where they're the descendants of Esau. All righty. Now, going back to the text in Job, chapter 2, when they come, notice he says, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Neophathite. And what did they come to do? They made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. And this says so much.
Like sackcloth and ash.
Yeah, they would be there feeling for him, trying to help him in every way they can. Sometimes when people are suffering, just being there is enough.
Well, most people won't do it nowadays.
Yeah, especially nowadays. It seems like
I
we're
got
all
a problem. Like, I gotta go.
Yeah, we've got issues. We don't have the time.
Yeah.
We claim we don't have the time, and we don't do this. And a lot of times too is the fact, especially when you lose loved ones or somebody like that, it's not what you say. Sometimes we say some things that we can't really back up while they're safe in the arms of God.
Yeah.
They've gone on to heaven.
This is the one thing I was like happy about my dad though.
Yeah.
It's not like one of the few incidents in my entire life where I was like, he actually was there. And he didn't, it wasn't a matter of like saying something, but in a way though, he was there more than anyone else too, because my family, which had the means to do so and do all of this, they didn't know how to handle the situation.
Right.
They were kind of like, cut me out.
Right.
And my dad was like patient, and he drove all the way from Kentucky down to Florida. And I was like,
and you see, that's what we're talking about. What people need at that moment in time is not necessarily for somebody to come and tell them how everything is going to be all right.
Sometimes you don't need to answer problems.
You don't.
You just got to be there.
You just got to be there. Sometimes we don't need somebody telling us.
Sometimes they want to hear
that it's going to be all right, because it's not. Things have changed. Yeah.
You feel a lot better sometimes when you just
get it off your chest for a little while. And sometimes that's the best thing to do. As we go through Job, when Job actually starts to make his speech in chapter 3, then they feel the need to try to say something, and everything just kind of spirals down from here. Because what happens after this is whenever Job has said something, they feel like they've got to defend God. They feel like they've got to defend what Job is going through, and they will even go so far before this whole thing is over of charging Job with sin. If you hadn't have done this, this would not have happened. I've worked for many years at a funeral home. And that's one thing I've learned a lot, is the fact that sometimes you don't need to, you just need to be there.
Mhm.
That's just it. They're telling somebody they love goodbye. Um, when I'm saying I worked at a funeral home, I worked part-time. I helped pick up bodies. I helped embalm them. I helped dress them, put them in caskets, would go through the whole funeral.
Yeah.
I would put the dirt on the grave.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? So you want to talk about that? That's kind of what I do. You name it, I did it.
Mhm.
And I saw fights start
Yeah.
over a will.
Overwhelming.
You know, I saw.
It'll push people to their brink.
Yes, it will. And especially when they're already mad about something else.
Yeah, it comes out.
It all comes out. And a lot of times whenever this kind of stuff happens, we automatically go to some passage of scripture that seem to suggest that the reason why you're suffering right now is because of some sin in your life.
My uncle said to me, my uncle's family always thinks he's a really smart guy because he's a millionaire and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, you know, this is all for the people, right? This is nothing. She's not in there. That's all done. And that always stuck with me. It was, to a lot of other people, it seemed callous, but that's just him. And he's like me. He just kind of just blurts out stuff.
Mm-hmm. But he has a very valid point in that respect. In that respect,
I haven't been back there to see any sort of grave or anything like that. So yeah, I don't feel any need to do that.
No, there's no need to. They're not there anymore. Their earthly body is
They've departed.
Yeah, and I think a lot about that whole idea of the body goes back to the ground.
To the dust you shall return.
Yeah. Nowadays, more folks are opting for cremation.
The problem, one thing that's big with people who don't have like a strong foundation in scripture is they start to try to reach out to them.
Right.
And that's a really dark thing.
That is a dark
realize
thing. Yeah.
How bad that is.
Yeah.
Because if something does respond to you, it's definitely not them.
That's right. And that's and the thing is too, is, as I said, the fights start before the funeral is over. You see people at their worst. You also see people at their best.
Yeah.
And as preachers and teachers, we've got to give out hope. I guess one of the hardest things for me to do sometimes is, as a preacher, it's not my job to judge that person that died.
Yeah. My grandmother went through that.
Yeah.
And she tried to tell me, like, oh, don't tell them this. I was like, this is the family preacher that you guys talk so highly about. And you're afraid that I'm going to tell him something that he's going to say something negative about. I didn't understand that. I thought it was so confusing. I was like, you talk so highly of this guy. And you're like, oh, I don't want him to know. That's a weird thing to me.
It is. And the thing is and what I'm trying to tell you is, as a preacher or somebody that might be called upon sometime to say some words, you've got to realize that what you say is not going to make a difference in their destination.
Yeah.
Their life, the way they've lived, they've made their own decisions.
Jesus says that, haven't I warned with you, or something like that?
He does.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things that sticks with me, because sometimes I want to be like, I want to tell people, like, you can't reach out to that person.
That's right.
You have to be careful.
Right.
But like, the way you say that and the way it comes out
sometimes doesn't work.
It may not be sensitive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, well, they're looking down on you. Well, I don't know if they're up there looking down.
That's another very, very important. I know exactly what you're saying. And so whenever I'm preaching a funeral for somebody that I don't know, I don't I talk about heaven. I talk about, I try not to talk about too much about the eternal damnation, but the bottom line is I wanted them to concentrate and do that. I know I read a story not too long ago. You can look this up. This actually happened, that it was back in 2011, 2012, something like that. A family got mad at a preacher, and because he just stood up there and told them that the guy went to hell.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And
I think my family had that happen to him. I think
Yeah.
that's why they were acting that way.
Yeah.
Because my step grandfather, his daughter died of alcoholism.
Mhm.
And it was like something happened at the funeral or something like
Yeah.
that.
And literally this particular preacher got beat up. I mean, they beat him up. They took him outside and they beat him up.
Some preacher
You know.
said something like, well, your son got killed in the midst of a crime. So he's not in heaven. I'm sorry.
And again,
You know, he's like in the middle of robbing somebody.
here's the thing I'm trying to get across, and I think you see this point. That's not our job.
Yeah, it's not your job to say that.
It's not God's job. Or
You gotta
excuse
be
me, job.
sensitive, like Jesus
God,
said.
God is going to be the one that judges.
You gotta be
Sensitive.
sympathetic.
Yes.
But then at the same time, well, like the thing is that's the thing with being a Christian too that changed me though, because I found that it was a blessing to be able to say like, oh look, I'm not going to hold this anymore. I'm not going to hold on to my family's concerns about what I did with my life.
Right.
None of that. I just dropped all of it, left it at the door, just like he says, just like Jesus said, let the dead bury the dead.
That's right.
You know, and I looked at it just like that.
And that's the way you've got to look at it. That's the way you've got to look at it.
You know.
So they and just think about this. This is the beauty of these people. They were religious people. They may have sought Job for religious instruction. They were weeping with those that weep. They wore sackcloth and ashes. They were feeling for him. And that to me is one of the most important things. And as if you have the opportunity as a preacher or something like that to do this, then you need to realize that being there. And you know, one of the sad tragedies of what's happened over the last couple of years with the COVID is the fact that you know, we've not been given that opportunity to grieve as we should.
What are you talking about?
Like if somebody dies, and then if a preacher, a lot of times they'll, you've got to stay so far away from everybody because of the COVID and stuff like that.
I don't.
And the thing is that, you know, that's.
I've had it 2 or 3 times and I've come right through it. I don't have any shots.
Yeah, well, I haven't either. But
I mean, like the way I look at it is if God wants me to live, he's gonna, you know, if I believe, I know you don't probably believe that, but I believe that he saved me in Iraq. So, you know, there's been instances like, that's why I try to tell people is like, you can't, you know, now I reference that one with Asa, you know what I'm talking about, where he says he got disease in his foot, right? And it says that he went and leaned on the doctors rather than calling on God. And it says that God let him die. Because he depended on the doctors rather than, you know what I mean?
I know what you're saying.
So,
yeah,
that's the way I look at it.
So, here's 3 guys.
They could have thought that it was going to infect them too, though. Maybe they could have thought. I mean, that might have been something that went through their mind. They're like, "Oh, you got bulls on your skin." I don't know, man.
They may have, but the thing was, they were there.
Yeah, they were there.
They were there, and that's now. Before it's over with, he's gonna call them miserable comforters. Yeah, you know, if y'all had kept your mouth shut, we'd probably been all right. Yeah. You know, but why is it that we always, and we all do it, want to try to bring some words of comfort, but we also make a lot of assumptions about things.
How do they sell or how do they do that? A funeral in this like Jewish type of thing?
It would depend.
Was it a cultural thing? Was it like everybody got together and that kind of thing, like a wedding or something? Family
obviously would. Friends obviously would. We think about the situation like in John 11. John 11 would, you know, when Lazarus died, Jesus came to that funeral.
I thought he was already in the ground.
No. Well, Lazarus he was already in the cave. Yeah. But the bottom line is Jesus came back and was there for him. Little did they know that they were going to be big surprised whenever Jesus came back. Well, you know that story goes.
They were saying that something funny too, though, that's been through history too a lot. Yeah. They were saying that, like, a lot of times it was only rich people that got that. Like, remember the guy who says, I'll let him, he could go in my tomb. Jesus could go in my tomb. Right. Because it was like a wealthy thing. Joseph of Arimathea. Do you remember the Old West? They used to say they keep a $5 in their pocket so you could bury me if I die. They don't throw me in the ground.
There you go. There you go. So these guys were there. Now, notice verse 12 in this. When they raised their eyes from afar and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. So Job, obviously, with boils from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet, he obviously has not washed. He probably has dirty, filthy clothes. There's not much need of getting into some clean clothes because they're going to be a mess within 30 minutes anyway. It was hard for them to see him like that. Yeah, and it was hard for them. They knew him not. It could be that the disease had possibly deformed his face. You know, if he had pustules all over his face, they could not recognize him. The thing that I love about these guys was the fact that they hurt with him. They hurt because he was hurting. Yeah. And the Bible says, what did they do whenever they saw him? They lifted their voices and wept. Yeah. They cried. They hurt because he hurt. And they tore their clothes. Now, this was a common thing at that time that they would tear their clothes to show their grief. Yeah. And so this often happened. And also they would sprinkle dust on their head. You see this in Joshua 7, 1 Samuel 4, 2 Samuel 1, Nehemiah 9, Ezekiel, Lamentations. The casting up of dust is the ideal of intense suffering. And they're throwing it up to heaven as kind of in a sense to get God's attention as they cry to heaven because of what they're going through. So that just says that they tore their robe, they sprinkled dust on his head. And so they sat down with him 7 days and 7 nights. And again, the 7,
the holy number.
You know, a lot of people call it the perfect number, but you think about 7 days, the Sabbath day. You think about that seems to be the idea. So it was an Eastern custom that no one say anything until the one in grief spoke or showed some signs of wanting some comfort. So just by sitting down with him, they showed their desire to hurt with him. And the time, 7 days and 7 nights, suggests the idea, Job, we're going to hang with you until the end. We're going to hang with you until whatever, okay? Until you're better or till you die. One or the other, we're going to be here with you. And that says so much. They said so much. And the Bible says they sat down with him and no one spoke a word to him. No one spoke a word to him. It may be that they were afraid lest they add more sorrow to her. Yeah. And again, this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Time heals all wounds. No, there's some wounds that time's not going to heal. Yeah. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, like you mean like relationships or something?
Broken relationships, deaths.
Yeah.
You know, he or she's better off. No, you don't. You don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's the point I was trying to make earlier. Whenever we preach,
whenever it happens suddenly, it's something like you can't wrap your mind around it. Like people, like my grandmother was in the hospital for a long time. Mm-hmm. I don't know, a long time. She was like slowly. I think God probably took care of her because she was a very, very devoted Christian. But slowly, and everybody knew. And I feel like almost like my dad and my uncle kind of like, wow, is she going to die? That sounds terrible, but they were kind of like frustrated with her. Mm-hmm. Like they're having to lift her up and put her in a bathtub and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
But I mean, it's a big difference when something happens, it's just like, boom, you didn't expect it. I was on vacation with my mom
Mm-hmm.
We were in another city. We were in Orlando at Disney World.
Hmm.
So it just happens like that.
It does happen that quick sometimes.
And
Sometimes it does, sometimes it don't.
you can't wrap your head around it.
No, you can't. You really can't.
Same thing with his kids there.
Yeah.
Too. And and anytime someone loses a child, it does something to them, you know. I mean, some people can keep going on, some people lose their minds.
Yeah.
I have a friend of that did that. He's just lost his marbles. He's just not there. He lost like a small child, like 5 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah. Well, that's not easy. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it's not easy. It's not. So I guess what I'm wanting to point out here is with these 3 friends coming, they did a lot of right things at first until they opened their mouths and tried to give Job answers.
They're trying to figure out a way.
They're trying to figure out what's going on. I understand what they're trying to do, but that still doesn't, justify what they did. So before we go any further, before we go on into chapter 3, just think about, and this is some time, maybe we need to spend a little bit of time thinking about all of this from these viewpoints, but I just jotted down a few questions. What would it be like to be Job before his affliction? Think about how things were going great for him. There was no problems, no difficulties. He was the richest man in the East. Whatever he wanted, he desired, he had. He had workers, servants. He was so wealthy. He worked, but he also was very concerned about the spiritual welfare of his children. Always offering sacrifices on their behalf. Think about what it would be like.
Well, the money's very realistic.
Yeah.
Like someone could lose that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about that on the way here. I was like, you can have all the money in the world. It's not going to do anything on Judgment Day.
That's right.
It's not going to do a single thing for you.
Nope.
All these people spend all this time. I see them striving like I'm trying to get rich.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that might be your downfall.
That's right.
It might be your downfall. I would look at it like this. This is the way I look at it. And that's why one of my family talks negatively about me. I look at it like anything over what I absolutely need is access. I look at it like if I had $1 million, I'd be thinking about what God's looking at me to do with that $1 million. Like, wow, this is a big responsibility.
It is.
Like, I got to do something with this. This is more money than I need.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
How can I do good with this? Or what can I?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I would look at it like, I got to get this out of my hands.
Yeah.
I want,
I know what you're saying.
I got to get this out away from me before it does something.
That's true.
Because you're talking about, well, the love of my dad always throws that out there, the love of money. Well, yeah, but he pointed exactly what that was. And he said, okay, we'll give all your money away. Well, you've got a love of money.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's hard for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven.
That's right.
I mean, I see what you're saying. It's more than just the money, but like, yeah, right. I get it. But you say you're gonna go through seasons, so right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're gonna go through. I mean, as a Christian, you're
Right.
gonna go through seasons and ups and downs. It doesn't mean God's necessarily cursing you. It just mean like sometimes things are just happening.
Things are just happening, and God allows them to happen.
Yeah.
So, think about what it would be like to be the target of the evil one. Well, in a sense, we all are. We've all got a target on our back. Satan's wanting to destroy us.
The moral of the story is turn to God.
That's it.
I mean, that's all you can do.
That's right.
That's what I learned. I don't like that let go and let God. People like to say that a lot. But I mean, in some instances, that is true. Like in a sense, like I do everything I think I'm supposed to do in my behalf. I try to, anyways. And then from that point on, this is out of my control. I can't do anything.
That's right.
Let God handle it.
And that's a big thing with us men. We don't want to let it go because we feel like we got to do something about it.
Accomplish something.
We've got to do something. Think about what it would be like to go through the unthinkable and never know why.
What do you mean the unthinkable?
What Job's been through.
Oh, okay.
Think about this: losing wealth, losing family. Think about
Most
that.
people probably would kill themselves.
Yeah,
They probably would.
yeah. Think about what it would have been like to be Job's wife. She lost the same thing, and now she's watching her husband in pure
It's
agony.
kind of crazy because he doesn't even think about killing himself, even though she said it, right?
He doesn't.
He does curse his birth.
Right. He cusses. And
I don't
again,
understand that either.
Well,
That's a difficult one.
That's one of those things that's part of the Hebrew narrative and the way the Hebrews would mourn.
Yeah.
They would curse these certain areas because if I was never born, then I would never have had to go through what I'm going through.
But don't you think, though, in a sense, like, well, especially with them too, even more so than me, like it's almost like you have a responsibility. Like you're not just your own. When
Right.
people realize that, kind of like you're not just your own, you're also God's, but you're your family's.
Mhm.
You don't want to get too much into that where you're trying to live your life for your family.
Right.
But I mean, like to think like, okay, well, I could just go. That's how I thought about when I was young. Like if I kill myself, if I would even think about that,
Mhm.
like that, what's it going to do to my mom and my family?
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
terrible.
It is
It's
terrible.
selfish.
And a lot of times folks won't even think about that
It's
because they're,
selfish, you know?
yeah, they think that's the solution to the problem.
Yeah.
And here's another thing. Think about what it would be like to know that you're the one that God's counting on.
Yeah. And then you foul him.
Yeah.
But what was I gonna say? Is that a Bible verse that says this too shall pass or something? I always think about that one. This too shall pass. You never heard that?
I've
That's a
heard that
saying or
passage
something.
before.
I've heard. And I always thought about that, like in a dark situation, it's like it feels like there's no way out right now. It feels like you can't handle it.
Uh-huh.
But you give it a day, give it, you know, a week
Yeah.
or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Some people have that idea. So I just typed it in very quickly. The thing is 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 2 Corinthians chapter 4, 17 and 18. Our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. We do not look at the things which are seen, but the things that are not seen. The things that are seen are temporary, but the things that are not seen are eternal. So, you know, it's actually not that this too shall pass thing, but it is, you know, it's still teaching that idea. We have to realize that as a Christian,
We're suffering.
number one, and notice how Paul described it. And you're talking about the Apostle Paul, who literally was beaten and killed for being a Christian. And he would say, this is our light affliction. It's just for a moment. It's not going to last long.
Yeah.
Okay. When I'm going through it, it don't seem like it short.
Yeah.
When I'm not going through it.
Well, it's like a depression. And
yeah,
I mean, you know, I don't know. I have depression with PTSD and all this other stuff too, naturally, just from a chemical reaction to it. But like sometimes it's hard, like you said, like the friends or whatever else. It's like it's hard for you to put yourself in someone else's shoes because really maybe you don't know what the depression is.
That's right.
It might be a lot darker than you've experienced.
That's exactly right.
And so I've seen that in some people where it's just like they just it's some of it is they allow it to happen.
Right.
But a cloud just comes over you and you all of a sudden feel depressed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
It does happen. It does happen. All right. So what we've come to in chapter 2, verses 1 or chapters 1 and 2 is here's the whole prologue. Here's what sets the stage for the rest of the book.
Yeah.
And in the rest of the book, it's going to be Job, his 3 friends. Then toward the end, it's going to be Elihu. And then at the very end, God's going to speak. And the book's going to come back with the idea at the very end that God has restored everything to Job that he allowed Satan to take. So the first, I think about the idea is, and I'm just going to kind of go through this very quickly. These first 2 chapters tell us a lot. Number one, it teaches us there are some things we can know and some things we can't know.
Yeah.
Okay. Deuteronomy 29:29 says the secret things belong unto God, but to those that he has revealed them, that's what we need to be studying and thinking about.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. We don't know about and we cannot know about.
When they had a prophet, though, then they would go to the prophet. Then, right?
A lot of times they would do that because they would hope that the prophet would give them some message.
Yeah.
Or something. But, you know, again, in this situation, especially if it was during the patriarchal age, again, who would have been the ones that God would have given the message to? The patriarchs, which would have been Job.
Yeah.
You know. Secondly, it teaches us patience and suffering. Patience is not something that we really are very good at, especially nowadays. I think it might have been easier, my opinion, years gone by because they were not so dictated by time like we are. They knew they had certain hours of the day to take care of certain things. They knew when the seasons changed and how long it went. But the bottom line is that they didn't know always how long. So patience and suffering, the idea that, and that's what the story's about. It's about patience and suffering. And Jesus, think about that on the cross, him dying as quickly as he did. It teaches us about Satan and his work. And the thing is this, and you spoke earlier about being in Iraq. Mm-hmm. The better you know your enemy, the better you defeat him.
Yeah.
Bottom line is that's true. Huh? Yeah. And that's definitely the case with Satan.
Yeah.
And so that's it.
You don't want to go too deep into that, but I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. You don't want to attract something to you.
That's exactly right.
But yeah, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Satan,
that's the way I look at it.
Yeah.
I look at how the scriptures say, and then I can stick with that. And then I know this is how he operates. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's walking to and fro upon the earth. A lot in one sentence says a whole lot about the whole situation.
Yeah.
And it does say that he's a lion seeking who he's going to devour.
That's right.
And he's getting into situations and trying to tempt people and push people in a certain direction.
That's right. And he's going to keep on trying to tempt us.
Yeah.
He's going to continue to seduce us to sin. So the better I know him, the better off I'll be. Sin would not be so easy to do if it didn't look good.
Yeah.
He's always going to make it look good. Okay.
When they say that Jesus was tempted in every man, it means that he had to have been tempted with everything that we were.
In every point, tempted like as we are, yet without sin. Yet at the same time, in all of this, God has limited Satan.
Yeah.
Thus far, no further. Thus far, no further.
What are you talking about?
He's telling Satan, you can go this far.
No further. Right here. Yeah.
No further. Next, God's will be done. He will get his will done. Think about the value of friends. We've spent a time talking about this. And think about this in this respect. People do serve God for other reasons than the blessings God gives them.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's what we need to be thinking about. Why do we serve God? It should cause all of us to stop and think for a moment. Do we serve God because he is God, because we love him, because of a relationship, or because he's blessed us and done all of this?
Yeah.
So we now begin in chapter 3 and going through chapter 31, the next big section of the book, where you start getting into these cycles of speeches between Job and his three friends. So the first cycle of speeches is from chapter 3, verse 1 through chapter 14 at verse 22. When we actually get into chapter 3, this is where Job begins to lament his whole situation. It's the idea of this is what's happening and this is why it's bad. So in this passage, he's going to get down to the nitty-gritty. He's going to talk about, I wish I was never born. I wish I died the moment I was born. I wish that, why are you allowing me to continue in this life if I am in this kind of misery? So let's kind of look at this. And one person has, as I read through the different commentaries, not just this one, but others in times past, the bottom line is he's in the valley of depression. I mean, he is really depressed. Things are bad. He's lost everything. He's lost everybody. His wife has told him, curse God and die. Just be done, and understand what Miss Job must have been feeling. So after 7 days of sitting with his friend, he opens his mouth and begins to speak. Why 7 days? Again, that seems to be an idea of completion. Some think the grief may have been so great that he did not want to talk. Sometimes they don't want to talk. Sit there with them in silence. That's all you need to do. It may be that, again, some of the other commentaries suggest the idea that he may have saw the restlessness of his three friends. They may have been, well, I certainly wish he'd say something so we could say something, And think about this 7 days. The friends did not speak until Job did. And this gave all of them 7 days of quiet. This gave all of them time to think. And all this time, as he's been through all of this, there's probably all of these negative thoughts were burning inside of him. And he finally opened his mouth. And I think as you're reading this very closely, he says what he says, gives full vents to his feelings. And so these words that we're reading here are not going to be off the cuff. There's something he's given a lot of thought to.
Yeah.
And so as you're reading this is where we get down to the nitty gritty of it, as he's struggling, trying to understand, and they're struggling, trying to understand, why do bad things happen to good people? So let's start off verses 1 through 10. Let's read that. After this, Job opened his mouth and cursed the day of his birth. And Job spoke and said, may the day perish on which I was born, the night in which it was said, a male child is conceived. May that day be darkness. May God above not seek it, nor the light shine upon it. May darkness and the shadow of the death claim it. May a cloud settle on it. May the blackness of the day terrify it. Okay, now let's just look at this. Here you see, as I mentioned earlier in the very beginning.
Curse something?
Huh?
Can they curse something?
Yeah, that's kind of.
I don't mean like curse, like you say it in a negative way. I mean, like, can someone like not like witchcraft, something like that?
Yeah,
because they talk about that.
They talk about cursing certain things.
Yeah,
but I think it was not so much the idea of actually cursing it and bad things happening, as much as they're just saying, I wish this had never happened. I wish that I had, denying reality.
Yeah.
And in this first part here in verses 1 through 5, what's he saying? I wish I'd never been born. Okay. May the day perish on which I was born. And so he's starting off talking about this. He cursed his day. Is he really doing anything productive here? He's just giving vent to his feelings. That is the only good productive thing that's going on. But can you really curse the day of one's birth? What good is it going to do?
That's what I'm
saying. It's not going to change anything.
You can't curse anyone. Right?
Yeah, you can't curse anyone, obviously, but you also can't curse what the reality of life is.
I almost thought it was like if you curse something, like you were asking God to do something bad to this person or something.
In some situations, some of the passages, and context will always emphasize this, there are some places where they would curse someone. Okay. Here he's just cursing a day of the week that or the day of the year that he was born. Yeah, and you can't do nothing about that anyway.
It's already done.
And so he says, in essence, what? He says, may the day perish on which I was born. Earlier, he said this in chapter, let me go back here. I want to make sure about this for just a moment. You speak as one of the foolish women speak, chapter 2, verse 10. Shall we accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? And in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Remember that? So now he's opening his mouth. Now this is the first time he's talking to his friends. And earlier he had talked to his wife. And he said to his wife, we've sought and had all this good stuff from God. We've got to realize we're going to have some hard times too. But now, later, he's now thinking, suffering through. I just wish that this day would be marked off every calendar. So instead of having 365 and a quarter day, we'll have 364 days,
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and you can't do anything about that. But you see, not only does he do that, he said, in essence, that's what he's saying. May it not rejoice, chapter 3, verse 6, may it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the number of the months. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And again, what I'm saying? At the very beginning, I talked about parallelism They say the same thing in different things, in different forms, trying to get across how much grief he is really experiencing.
What is Leviathan?
Huh?
Some people have made up a lot of crazy things about that.
Yeah, and we'll whenever we get there, we'll talk about it, because again, if you're reading, depending on what commentary you're reading,
No, I'm talking about people have said all kinds of
yeah, I know.
like, I mean,
Yeah.
some people talk about it being some sort of evil,
Mhm.
something like that.
Demon.
A guy has talked about it being a dragon, like a literal dragon, which
Mhm.
is actually a dinosaur.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and there are some passages that seem to suggest that there were, especially in the book of Job, there were dinosaurs,
yeah,
you know, Leviathan, Behemoth.
yeah.
We're going to see this again later in the later part of Job.
Okay.
So we're going to see both of these.
This
a
is
little
not
bit later
mentioned anywhere else, right?
No,
Okay.
no.
That's what I thought. So
Mm-hmm.
they're just reading too much.
Let me say this. No, as far as I remember. Let me give me some time.
Yeah.
I might go back and look at that again. Okay. All righty. But notice also he says, you know, I wish it was obliterated off. I want it banished. My prayers that the earth forgets the day I was born. And again, he's hopeless now.
That's like, what's his face? Jesus said about Judas, it would be better that he had never been born.
If he had never been born. And that's kind of what he's saying here. And then notice we go on here a little bit further. He emphasizes the idea, the day perish on which I was born, and the night in which it was said a male child is conceived. So not only does he want everybody to curse the day of his birth, but he says, the day I was conceived, I wish that day was gone too. You know, so there's even that much respect. He's cursing the day of his birth and the day of his conception. The day of a man child being born in the Jewish economy was a day of rejoicing. And he says, nobody needs to rejoice over me, because look what's happening to me. And he goes on, verse 4, may that day be darkness. You know, he realized that wishing his birthday gone was useless. It was impossible. You know, when we're in pain, when we're hurting emotionally or physically, we wish or hope that something would stop the pain.
It's funny though, because you really don't have a choice when you're born.
That's amen. And that's
find yourself in a situation, and here comes responsibility.
There you go.
Right thing.
There you go. There you go.
It's just like you just land here,
Mhm.
and then that's what it is.
You're here now, and you got to deal with it.
Things we need you to do.
That's right, and you got to deal with it, and that's what the rest of your life's about: dealing with it one day at a time.
Choice.
Right?
That's one thing.
That's it. From here on, that's your choice. May that day be darkness again. He wishes it's all gone. May God above not seek it, nor the light shine upon it. You hear again the same thing, just different words, right? Parallelism. May darkness and the shadow of death claim it. Okay. He's saying here in essence, you know, I want men on earth to forget this day. I want God to forget this day. Don't let the
Doesn't David talk about shadow of death in Psalms?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That's like
Psalms 23.
What is that? What does that mean? Is that
a lot of people take that in Psalms 23, and we're going to see it here too.
It's like afterlife, or is it?
Death is a lot of times considered to be a shadow. It's not something real in that. Now, we know it's real. I mean, we know we lose somebody that we love. Okay. Yeah. We understand that. But I think God uses this poetic language to suggest that death is not the end of the story.
I got you.
And I think that's what he uses when he uses this phrase, the shadow of death. May darkness and the shadow of death claim it. It's death, especially for the child of God. What is death? All right. Death is simply this. It's separation.
Yeah.
When I die, my body separates from my spirit.
Well, I think we're all going to get judged. I think a lot of people are going to find that.
Right.
A lot of people are going up there. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to all get judged.
That's right.
And then this time they believed that the Sheol or whatever.
Right.
And they believed that was a bad place you went. And I guess Abraham's bosom or paradise.
Yeah. And again, that's a whole nother study for a whole nother class.
Yeah.
The different Hebrew as well as Greek words for
You talked
heaven
about
and hell.
it, Luke. We talked.
Yeah, we did talk about that a little bit in Luke. So yeah, all of that is keyed in there. So when he says darkness and the shadow of death, again, it's a deep shadow. It's deep darkness. It's thick.
He's
darkness.
not wishing he's going to hell.
No.
Obviously
No.
not, because that would be really bad.
He uses this phrase shadow of death 9 times.
Yeah.
As he talks. Okay. So he continues to curse the day of his birth. He hopes that darkness and the shadow of death claim this day for its own. He said that may the clouds settle on it, and the blackness of the day terrify it. You know, it could be a Scirocco.
What's that?
A Scirocco was a cloud of wind that is blowing so much that it's picking up all this sand off the desert.
Like
and it just obliterates. You can't see nothing because it's a sandstorm.
Yeah, I've been in those before. It's good.
Okay, and a lot of times, think about this. It's you've seen them. You've been in it, so it's hot, but it's also thick darkness. You can't see in front of you.
It's in the sky.
Yeah, it's all in the sky. You're unable to breathe, and they talk about a darkness they could feel. Well, yeah, this is what this is. Okay, so that's exactly what it is. It becomes hot as an oven. They may have to use their candles if they're in the house at noon because it's so dark.
These places are hot.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to anywhere close to there,
Mm-hmm.
it's hot like at nighttime.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sand heats up. The sun beats down on the sand and it puts like
that much heat coming up off the ground.
Yeah, at nighttime. It's ridiculous, like 100 degrees.
Yeah.
Pitch black.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. So you see, that's kind of what he's saying. He said, this day I was born, this day I was conceived, which again, he had nothing to do with whatsoever.
Yeah.
He said, I wish they were gone. I just wish they were gone. As for that night, may darkness seize it. The night, and you remember earlier in verse 3, may the day perish on which I was born. So now he's talked about that day, verses 4 and 5. Now he's talking as for that night. This is the night of verse 3, the night in which it was said, a male child was conceived. For that night, may darkness seize it. May it not rejoice among the days of the year. May it not come into the number of the months. So the thing is that he cursed the day of his birth. He turned back to the night of his conception.
I would have left. I gotta be honest.
Yeah.
I would have left.
Yeah.
I don't like to watch people pay themselves. Like the moment that I feel like they're going in that territory, I'm like, even if you're like handicapped,
Mm-hmm.
like don't pity yourself. That's not a good.
Well,
you know what I mean, though.
I understand what you're saying.
It's like uncomfortable,
right? It is very uncomfortable. It is very uncomfortable. So think about his friends as they're there to try to comfort him, and they're hearing him say, "I wish I'd never been born. I wish I'd never been conceived," and goes on. You know, that's it. Let no sound of joy. Let no joyful announcements be made. You know, I remember when our 3 sons were born, I'd call.
It's like giving up.
Yeah.
That's what it's like, right?
Yeah.
Like giving up.
And that's
some
where
people still continue living, but they gave up.
They gave up. They said, I don't care anymore.
I don't care about nothing.
I don't care about nothing.
Shower or whatever.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so here he is. That's what he's saying. He says, oh, may that night be barren. May no joyful shout come into it. Dad announced my birth. Don't do that. You know, don't announce my birth. Don't announce my birth. We're going to talk about this in just a moment. May those who curse it, who curse the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. Now, the word Leviathan, a lot of times, some of the commentators seem to think it's this is what's really interesting. A lot of people think it's a crocodile, and I'm like, how can they're ready to arouse Leviathan? The ideal is they're just asking for trouble.
That guy I was telling you about that did the debate against atheists, he went on to that too, and he was one of the ones that was talking about as a dinosaur or something like that.
Right.
Because later on they were, I don't know, what is that? Which one is that?
Verse 6. No,
verse 8.
Verse 8, yeah. Verse 8, yeah.
I don't like what this one says. 3.
3:8, yeah.
Having cursed the day, Leviathan occurs 6 times in the Old Testament verse.
Yeah. In this particular commentary, the MacArthur Study Bible, in that he sounds that those who pronounce the most powerful curses, even to arousing the destructive sea monster. And again, it's going to be used again in chapter 41 at verse 1.
This is a mythological creature.
Okay, a mythological creature. Okay.
Charlatans pretend to have power to arouse.
Uh-huh.
Charlatans.
Yes, that's right.
That's an ugly word.
Yeah. So, the idea that he says to raise their mourning. Okay. Notice they're ready to arouse Leviathan. They curse it who cursed the day, those who are ready to arouse Leviathan. The suggestion seems to be that he's offering the strongest curse possible so as to destroy the day of his birth and the night of his conception. That's the idea.
Cursing his family too, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, his mom and his dad.
Right. And so rather than rejoicing over the day of his birth, rejoicing over the day of his conception, he hated it.
He's got depression.
Yeah, he does.
That's what he's got.
He does.
Got like deep depression.
Deep depression. You can understand that. And think about it in this respect as well. He hates it. He hates it. Verses 9 and 10. May the stars of its morning be dark. May it look for light, but have none. And not see the dawning of the day, because it did not shut up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hide sorrow from my eyes. So he continues to curse his day. He wishes it was never be. He wishes it to be gone. But if it must come, then let the stars of the morning be dark. Don't let the light shine. Don't let the stars' light shine upon that day. Don't let it look for light. Let that day look for light, but it's not going to have any. Hebrew parallelism, saying the thing. Don't let it be the dawning of the day. Some people are glad to see another day. They've made it through another night. And Job is saying, no, I don't even want it to see another day. I don't want it. And again, why? Because it did not shut the womb of Job's mother.
It kind of seems like he's giving up.
Do what?
It kind of seems like he's giving up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure there's some more of that.
He curses his day because it did not prevent him from being conceived or born. And again, think about the idea of how deep he has to grieve to think that the day or night could have closed his mother's womb. That's crazy, but that's exactly.
You're talking crazy talk.
Yeah.
Look, come on, Joe.
And
get
again,
out there and plow fields.
Right. But again, before we judge him too harshly, remember what he's been through.
Well, I mean, obviously, we don't know. We don't know what it's like.
We don't know the constant pain. We don't know the constant.
Like I said, it either breaks you or it doesn't.
That's right.
That's depression. Like
that's it.
If that's the situation where people will a lot of times kill themselves.
That's exactly right. That's right. My dad suffered a lot of that.
My grandfather did that. He killed himself.
Did he?
Yeah, he had problems. But
yeah. When my dad was in the Marine Corps, he served in Korea and served 2 tours of duty in Vietnam.
Yeah.
He was at Khe Sanh. He was at the Choisin Reservoir when the Chinese attacked in the Korean War. He saw a lot of stuff.
My other grandfather was in the Korean War.
And so the thing is that there were times when I thought about, and I saw him, he just had to get away. Because otherwise,
what helps too, though, is like doing something.
Right.
It may not seem like that, but like even though you're like, sometimes go to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
go to work, get your mind off of it.
Yeah, see, that's what my dad did. Whenever he
when I went
retired
overseas, I got my mind off.
Yeah,
it was hard.
Mm-hmm.
I got a gift from my mom when I got to Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
When she was already dead. When we just buried her,
Mm-hmm.
she had sent me a birthday gift, and I just got it when I got there.
Wow.
So, but when you dive into something, and you're just like, let me get out of myself.
Yeah.
That's what they used to say in AA and all those other things too. Like, you get out of yourself. You guys worry about somebody else.
And that's what my dad did. He made a garden. Whenever in the middle of winter, he had a heater in a workshop, and he was building stuff with wood. He was always doing something.
He keeps himself busy.
Yeah.
The devil, what that says, the devil something days, or I can't remember exactly. There's some saying like that. Like in other words, if you don't have the days are evil or something like that. If you don't have something going on, the devil, like in other words, you'll get into trouble.
That's exactly right.
You know.
And so that's what's happening. That's what's happening here. So we come on down to verse 11. Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? So now he's been cursing the day he was born and the day he was conceived. So now it's taking another track. It's going another way. If we can't curse the day I was born, then why did I not die at birth? A lot of people ask that question, you know. He sees the utter futility in wishing that he'd never been born. Now he wishes that he died from his mother's womb. Jeremiah wished the same thing. Jeremiah was a prophet of God, and Jeremiah if you read and study through the book of Jeremiah, it seemed like I taught it not too long ago here. But one of the things that I see about Jeremiah is the fact that he struggled with all that he was going through, and he does his share of complaining. In Jeremiah chapter 20 at verse 7, notice this. Jeremiah 20 verse 7. Lord, you induced me and I was persuaded. You were stronger than I, and I have prevailed. I'm in derision daily, and everyone mocks me. And so what Jeremiah is saying, Lord, is you wanted me to do the preaching. I'm doing the preaching, and now everybody, in essence, you were stronger than I. You kind of forced me to do it, and now everybody mocks me. I'm in derision when I spoke and cried out violence and plunder, because the word of the Lord was made to me, a reproach and a derision daily. So Jeremiah says, I will not make mention of him. I will not speak any more in his name. But his word was in my heart like a burning fire shut up in my bones. And I was weary of holding it back, and I could not. Jeremiah says, I didn't want to preach anymore. Nobody's listening. Nobody's hearing me.
Like
They're
Elijah.
cursing me.
Remember Elijah?
Yeah.
Elijah said, I am alone and am following you, and they seek my life. And then God says, I have reserved 7,000 that have not bowed the knee to Baal.
Right. And there's the thing to think about in this respect. When you're looking at Job, when you're looking at Elijah, when you're looking at Jeremiah, God's still with them.
Yeah.
But all they can see at that moment in time, and before I throw a stone at any of those guys and say, boy, you should have done better than that.
No, they were in a bad situation.
Yeah. And you know,
I mean, he was in that one, Elijah, they desecrated the temple, the Holy of Holies or something. They put Baal in there or something. They did something. He said, come here and look. And they were worshiping Baal or something like that. I can't remember.
That was Ezekiel.
Maybe I'm wrong.
That was Ezekiel.
But there was something like that. And I was like, yeah. I get it. Like, and then you're trying to go and talk to, it's the same thing with Jesus. Really, think about it.
Yeah.
Jesus is doing the same thing. Or even John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And they killed him.
There was a lot of folks that died in through the Bible because they were preaching God's word.
Trying to tell them to turn away.
Go on and look and see what notice what else Jeremiah says. He says, he said that I hear a mocking. And what are they saying? Fear on every side. Why? Because that was Jeremiah's message. Jeremiah's message was, folks, you need to open up your eyes because they're coming after us. And he says, report, and we will report it. And all my acquaintances watch for my stumbling. Perhaps he can be induced. We will prevail against him. We will take our revenge on him. And so he's got his enemies looking for a chance to get him. He's preaching a message nobody wants to hear. And he's saying, in essence, God, I'm tired of this. I didn't ask for this job. I didn't want this job. You called me for this job. I'm a young man. I didn't want it. And Lord, look at what they're doing.
So the evil in them is persecuting the good in them.
That's right. But notice verse 11. The Lord is with me as a mighty, awesome one. You see, verses 7 through 10, he's complaining because of this, but he said, Lord, you're with me, and my persecutors will stumble and not prevail. They will be greatly ashamed, for they will not prosper. Their everlasting confusion will never be forgotten. But you see the mind and heart. You test the righteous. Let me see your vengeance on them. notice he's honest, he's forthright. Lord, let me see your vengeance on these that have done this. But now look in verse 13 says, sing to the Lord, praise the Lord. He's delivered the life of the poor. But notice verse 14. Cursed be the day in which I was born.
Yeah.
Let the day not be blessed in which my mother bore me. That's exactly what Job was saying.
Mm-hmm. Maybe he was quoting him.
Yeah, maybe. May very well be. Let the man be cursed who brought news to my father, saying, a male child has been born. Let that man be like the cities which the Lord overthrew and did not relent. Let him cry in the morning, because he did not kill me from the womb, that my mother might have been my grave.
That's terrible.
Why did I come forth from the womb to see labor and sorrow, that my days should be consumed with shame? And he goes on in the 21st chapter, and God tells him, the city that you're preaching to is going to be destroyed because of their sins. So why was he saying this? Nobody wanted to listen to what he had to say. Nobody was changing their lives.
But isn't it always kind of like that? It's like that today.
Yeah.
A lot of people will look at it and be like, oh, there's a lot of Christians. Not really.
No.
Not really.
No.
Not a lot of them follow the Bible.
No, you're exactly right there. And
it seems like there's always like something like exactly like that.
Yeah.
Like there's a persecution, whether it be spiritual underneath the surface or not.
Mm-hmm.
They're persecuting our ideas, if nothing else.
Right.
They're pushing out this stuff, homosexuality, what do you call it? Abortion, all this. Like there's the evil that's pushing that out.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Satan is still doing his job. Satan is still doing his job. All right. So we're coming back to Job 3. Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? Why did the knees receive me? This phrase, why did the knees receive me, could suggest his actual birth, where, he would be coming from his mother's womb. And again, the knees would be the first thing that's seen. Mm-hmm. Some others suggest the idea that this could have reference to the father. The father would take the baby and set the baby on his knees, and therefore said, he's part of the family. He's a legitimate child. He's a legitimate child, part of the family. Back in those days, daddies had a lot of authority, especially during the time of the Romans, but especially also during this time. If the fathers didn't want the child would be left to die. And again, if there might have been some question as to his wife's faithfulness.
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say there.
But they couldn't do a paternity test back then.
No, they couldn't do a paternity test.
Sure,
if he wasn't sure, then he could. It was life and death was literally in the decision of the father.
Yeah.
So if the father took the child, put him upon his knees, then that showed his acceptance of the child. So either way, in verse 12, it could be the mother's knees or the father's knees. But then notice going on, why the breast that I should nurse? Now I would have lain still and been quiet. I would have been asleep. Now, notice this idea, I would have been asleep. If I had died at birth, Job says, I would have been spared from all these troubles. I could have easily rested. And so here seems to be an idea that you find a lot in the Old Testament, and again, even in the New Testament, the idea that when you die, sometimes it's compared to sleep.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be what?
That confused me at first. But
it's not sleep as we understand it, but the idea of being raised from the sleep.
Made a doctrine around that too.
Yeah.
I know. The sleep is it's a delicate way of putting it. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much like you were talking before. It's like a delicate way of saying, okay, well, they're asleep now, rather than say he was killed.
Yeah.
He was stabbed with a knife.
That's right.
That's
exactly right.
You're like,
okay, let's take a couple of minutes. Okay, we're picking up, I think, with Job 3:13 through 16. So again, we've seen Job complaint. Why did I not die at birth? Verse 11. Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? Why did the knees receive me? Why the breast that I should nurse? For now, and here's what he's saying, I would have lain still and been quiet. I would have been asleep. So there's the idea of soul sleep, the idea that whenever we die, we're just really asleep. There's that figure is used a lot of time. Remember, whenever Jesus was about to raise Lazarus, Lord, by this time he stinketh. No, he's just asleep. So there is that idea that's brought out a lot of times through Scripture that death is nothing more than a sleep, a time that we're waiting until we finally are called to judgment. So that's it. So that's what he was saying here.
Lazarus and the rich man will tell you different, though.
That's right.
That don't you agree that that's a pre-judgment? That's not. I mean, I know it says you die and then judgment, but there would be no judgment day if that was the case. That means that each person is getting judged right away,
somehow or another. And I'm not sure exactly how it works, but obviously they are, from what we read in Luke 16 and that story of the rich man and Lazarus. They are in two separate places.
Yeah.
And they will know at that moment in time where they're going to spend eternity.
Yeah.
Maybe it's kind of like,
but
this is my best explanation for this. And I don't know that it's
Jesus had to go back there to save the good.
Right.
Ones,
right. His blood did take care of
if they did not believe in him. I mean, they did ahead of time too, but he still had to go preach to them, right? Because they couldn't be saved either. I mean, isn't that correct? Like,
I think again, God would, under those circumstances, would judge you by what knowledge that you had.
Yeah.
So if you were one of the older ones like Job or some of these others from the Old Testament, you would be judged by that term or by that law, as opposed to that. But if you were striving to live by that law, then Jesus' blood took care of that too.
Yeah.
You see, and I think that's what he's trying to bring out in that respect.
Yeah, I was gonna say I thought that no one could be saved by that. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, and then he says, like, in other words, like Jesus says, well, Abraham joyed to see my day. And that would have been part of the reason why Abraham would have joyed to see his day. Was like, I might need that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, Abraham would need that because he sinned like everybody else did.
Well, and then they were saying, well, you know, whenever we go back to the Old Testament, and a lot of times people will say, oh, this is a totally different thing. But in a lot of ways, Jesus was saying, like, come back here and I'll show you that it was faith, that you had to have faith, that you're supposed to love God with all your heart. These are not new concepts.
That's exactly
what I mean?
That's exactly right. They had to have faith. We have to have faith.
Yeah.
And that's what the Hebrews 11 tells us.
Yeah, that's why Paul goes back there to prove that.
Over and over and over again. So the ideal of the sleep was the intermediate state of the dead, where they're kind of, as it was, they're at rest. He said, if I had died whenever I was born, then I would be at rest. It also suggests the idea to us that death for God's people is rest. And rest sometimes is
something like that. Samuel says something like that when Saul, and this is when people talk about talking to the dead. I like to bring this one up because this is the only example where God actually allowed a dead person to talk to him.
That's exactly right.
Every other time it was a demon.
That's right.
Every other time. And he woke up there and said, you're going to die. So he came, why did you interrupt me?
You're going to be where I am.
He wanted to say, why did you interrupt me? And then he died.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So that makes a very, very valid point. So what Job is saying here is that no matter what, guess what? He says, I would have been at rest with kings and counselors of the earth. So the kings and counselors of the earth who built ruins for themselves, notice they built ruins for themselves. Kingdoms have come and gone.
That sounds,
and
I
so
thought I was going to say something negative.
No, kingdoms have come and gone. The remains of the Babylonian Empire is being destroyed, have been destroyed, is continuing to be destroyed, because you may have, again, you were over in Iraq. You may have been reading that after this whole situation played out in
well, that guy's town is pagan all over it.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot going on in that town.
Yeah.
Though, but the town, yeah, in Babylonia, Babylonia, that Saddam was trying to rebuild it. You know
Right.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but that guy's town, there was a lot. That's why they do a lot of that stuff.
And the thing is that they've been destroying a lot of that.
This is the story.
Yeah.
It actually came from the moon god.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a lot of that stuff came from. And his family was into pagan worship. So there was a lot of yeah. And that Babylonia is an actual place.
Right. It is an actual place. And it right after, I think, the Taliban, I think there were some places in that area that they were actually tearing down a lot of those
museums,
walls and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was.
Oh, yeah. You're talking about, it's like, yeah, I know what you're saying. It was like built into the mountain.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. They were trying to face it.
Yeah.
They blew it up.
So here's the same thing. He says they built ruins for themselves. The princes had gold. He says, think about the idea that what he's trying to say is these kings build these huge cities that become desolate. These builders of great tombs, the pyramids of Egypt.
Yeah.
They're there, but they're nothing but tombs. That's all they are.
Yeah, they didn't live in it.
No, they didn't live in them.
Weird.
They just built these places for these tombs, getting them ready for the life to come. Yeah. The princes had gold. Notice the idea.
They were buried with their gold a lot of times.
Yeah. And the princes who had gold, they had gold. Notice the phrase, they had gold.
Yeah.
They could have had it while they were alive, but now they don't have it because they're dead. A lot of good it's going to do, right?
People steal it.
That's right. And this as well as I do, this as well as I do. They filled their tombs with gold. Especially the Egyptians had the idea that in afterlife, you needed food, you needed your wealth.
They thought they were going to
take care of
that
everything.
body.
That's right.
That's why they did so much to the body.
That's exactly
They thought
right.
they were going to get in that body and walk away or something.
And they'd have all the witches and everything they needed for the afterlife.
Yeah.
Well, here again, think about that idea. They filled their tombs with such. You always heard of Tutankhamun, King Tut.
Yeah.
And all the pharaohs, and look at the golden caskets and all this other stuff. It was just awesome. They thought they would need it in their next life. So, what you saying? No. He says, he said, they filled their princes had gold, who filled their houses with silver. And then he asked the question, why was I not hidden like a stillborn child? Why, if I was born, why couldn't I have died at that moment in time? And he wishes that he was like an infant that never saw the light.
But you wouldn't cease to exist, right?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I think that babies go to heaven.
I think so too. I believe that's what.
I mean, there's no way they can do wrong. They can't judge
That's right.
between right and wrong.
That's right. Here's the point. All are equal at the grave. Kings, princes, wise men, stillborn babies. They're all equal at the grave.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of people that don't know that though when they get there you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, there's a lot of famous people that probably died that were probably like, you know who I am, don't you?
And God's saying, so.
It doesn't matter. They're going to be judged the same way. They're going to be right next to it.
That's exactly right. Notice what else he says. He says, verse 17, there the wicked cease from troubling. And there the weary are at rest. Here in the grave, the wicked cease from causing trouble and being in trouble.
Yeah.
I ain't got to worry in the grave. I ain't got to worry about somebody killing me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do what you got to do.
Well, that's what he says in heaven too. And that's one of the things where people think that they can just live out where they want to live. It says you're not going to go to heaven if you're going to cause any trouble at all. We can see that he's not going to let that happen again.
Nope, he's not. Wicked people are restless. Okay, they're just always restless. They're never satisfied.
Yeah, that's the thing though, right? Like an addiction or whatever it is, you're just always consumed by it.
That's right.
And maybe you don't see it while you're in it, but other people see it.
Other people see it very quickly. And he says, then also the weary are at rest. Think about the wicked cease from troubling, the weary are at rest. They're exhausted, they're worn out. Job could have been referring to himself. And he's saying, in essence, that the grave is the only place I have of being at peace now. I'm in such turmoil and everything, and in such pain, physically, emotionally. He said, the only place I'm going to find any rest is in the grave.
I almost wonder if, like, I don't know if I'd want to go to judgment at that moment. It might be like, maybe God's really mad at me. Maybe there's something I need to fix.
Yeah, and maybe that should cause all of us to stop for a few moments.
You know what I mean, though? Like,
relationship
he's like wishing that he'd be dead. Like, maybe like, whoa, wait, maybe there's something I need to do.
Yeah. As he emphasizes this idea, he says the weary are at rest. We go back to Revelation chapter 14, verse 13. He talks about those that worship the beast in his image. They shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels, the presence of the Lamb. And then he says, verse 12, here's the patience of the saint. Here are those who keep the commandments of God. And I heard a voice from heaven, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow them. So,
because you need works.
About the close, yeah, right. And about the closest we're ever going to get to understanding real rest is maybe when we're asleep at night, and we're not thinking of anything. We're really, and that's why I think a lot of times it describes this idea of rest as sleep, as ceasing from our troubles and trials.
Yeah,
I think that's why he uses this phrase so many different times.
Well, sometimes it's like like just like the dead or being dead or whatever. Sometimes people prey upon the mystery. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they prey upon people's hearts for the mystery. Like, oh, you don't really know what happens when you die. They don't really know. Christians don't know. You know what I mean?
I know what they're trying to say.
Yeah. Well, you're trying to prey upon someone's mystery because they don't know that. That person doesn't know that.
And that person that's telling them that don't know that.
It's like dreams too.
Yeah.
The same thing with dreams that you were talking about. Like some people don't know, like, well, why does this happen? Why did I have this dream or something like that? I don't know. I have bad dreams sometimes. I don't think it's a symptom of something.
Yeah. Yeah. And then verse 19, Your
Revelation.
Yeah, no, I'm back at Job 3:19. He said, the small and great are there. Verse 18. There the prisoners rest together. They do not hear the voice of the oppressor. The small and great are there. The servant is free from his master. So in death, prisoners who were often sentenced to hard labor, they finally are at rest. Death is their discharge. They don't have to work anymore.
Or Revelation's not a reference to that.
Yeah, and vice versa. So there you go. He emphasizes the idea the prisoners have to work no more. The prisoners don't have to hear any more insults. They don't have to hear any more commands to work.
Who are we talking about? Are we talking about hell? Are we talking about?
No, notice again, the wicked cease from troubling. The weary are at rest. There the prisoners rest together. They do not hear the voice of the oppressor. So again, would some of these prisoners be guiltless? Yes. Would they have been just thrown in jail because of a wicked taskmaster? Yes. And so they would have been beaten and forced to do this labor. And now, once they did, they don't have to labor anymore. Okay. And that's the point that he's making in all of this. I wish I was dead so that I didn't have to deal with all of this. And so that's where it all starts. So no more insults, no more commands to work, no more beating, no more oppression. They're no longer under the taskmaster. The small and great are there. The servant is free from his master, verse 19. Poor and great, popular and shy, master and slave, ruler and the ruled, bosses and employees, you name it. In death, all are alike are free from suffering in this world.
Jesus says, "Give you rest."
That's right. I will give you rest. Matthew 11:28.
I think that's the main reason.
That's right.
Because a lot of people were in slavery.
That's right. All are free from suffering in the world. Death knows no difference. You can't buy death off. You can't sit back and say, well, I'll live forever. No, you can't do that.
That's why people think they can do it. They're trying to figure out a solution. Put my body into a robot, put my mind into.
That's it. So his life is misery. Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter of the soul? He's cursed the day of his birth. He's cursed the fact that he didn't die just as soon as he was born. He wished things could be this way, but wishing those things ain't going to change what he's having to deal with right now, is it?
No.
Wishing don't change. It's not helped him out. And so what is he saying here? Why is light given to him who is in misery and life to the bitter of the soul? So now he's saying what? I can't go back and wish that my birthday was taken off the calendar. I can't wish the day or the night that my mother conceived me was taken off the calendar. I wish I could go all of that. But he says, you know what? It's not changing anything. He says, why is light given to him who is in misery? Life to the bitter of the soul, who long for death, but it does not come, and search for it more than hidden treasures.
How does he know that God has hedged him?
What now?
It says that he says God has hedged him. That just
Oh, you're getting ahead of me here a little bit. That's
sorry.
okay. That's all right. That's all right. So why is light given to him who's in misery? Life, who long for death, but it does not come. Search for it more than hidden treasures. He's looking for anything to get out of here. And why is life given to one who's bitter, who has to bear so much, is what he's asking in verse 20. They long for death. He says, there are people that are living now that wish they were dead.
Yeah.
A cancer patient that's just really what has been put through the ringer with chemo and everything else.
Yeah.
And they know that there's no hope.
Mm-hmm.
So, that does not give us the right to what? Off ourselves, right?
Yeah.
But the bottom line is they look to die.
I don't know. I feel like sometimes God allows that, and then see, like just like this situation, sees what you're gonna do. I've known a lot of people that have gotten cured of cancer, and it seemed hopeless.
Yeah. But we also face this reality, and you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
All of us are going to die.
Yeah, and I would have thought that too if I'd had all that boils and junk on my skin and everything.
Yeah. The fever, feeling miserable every day. He's saying, he says, why do I continue to live when I long for death? And I search for death more than hidden treasures. He pictures death as a hidden treasure. Just picture a man with a shovel looking for treasure.
Yeah. And
the treasure he's looking for is death.
Yeah.
Just to get out of here. A lot of at that time, due to the instability of government, a lot of people buried their treasures in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And for some people at that time, finding buried treasure becomes a lifelong occupation, right?
Yeah.
We're always looking for something. I don't know about you, but sometimes I do. When they talk about maybe some of these pirate places, they may have buried gold or something like that.
They found a bunch of, what's his name, the drug dealer's money. He buried money everywhere. The Pablo, he buried like a lot of money because he didn't know what to do with it. He had so much money, you couldn't give it away fast enough.
And so you're like, think about it in this respect. Suppose you had all the money in the world.
Mm.
After a while, you get sick of it.
It's not going to make you happy.
It's not going to make you happy. In fact, you spend more time worrying about it.
If you're already like soul sick, then the money is going to make that. It's going to intensify it. It's going to intensify it. And then you get that new Ferrari, and then you're going to be like, well, it costs a lot of money to put gas in this thing, and it costs a lot of money to get a tune-up. Eventually, that money's going away. You're like, wait, I have a lot of money.
That's exactly right. But the thing I like to do is make more money.
And then you find that the friends that you have are not really your friends, and they just want to be around you while you
for
have
money. The money. That's right. And so he goes on and he says, those who search for it more than hidden treasures, they rejoice exceedingly. Who rejoiced exceedingly? When they find death. some people push the envelope and they kill themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of us from time to time have been around those that have killed themselves.
I've seen it a lot. I had 6 guys kill themselves in one night in the building I lived in.
Hmm.
Sometimes the crazy thing is I would be talking to a guy and didn't know that he was on the brink of doing something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know exactly what I would have said to him. I might have said anything. I don't know. It's like, hey man, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then like
you find out.
that's a big thing in the military. They do it a lot.
Yeah. There's a story told about a man that was burdened with life, and he wished for death to come. So death came.
Mm-hmm.
And asked him what he wanted. And he said, will you help me bear my burdens?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the way it is with most men.
Yeah.
I've just got so many problems I can't bear anymore. So will you help me bear my burdens?
I like what Paul said, though. He said, well, I'm torn because I can be here helping you guys, but I would kind of like to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was so much of a suicidal
No,
thought.
It's not suicidal.
It was not suicidal.
It was accepting of his fate.
That's right. And
it's very sure. It's absolutely 100% that he's going to die.
Looking forward to his death.
It's like absolutely, probably 100% that I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And at the hands of these people.
That's right. That's right. So why is light given to a man whose way is hidden? You know, if a man don't know which way he's going, what good is light? But if you have a goal, we want to go to heaven. So Jesus is the light of the world, right? So think about it in that respect. If you don't know where you're going, then it doesn't matter. Why would you look for light?
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter where you're going? And notice also the ideal of, he says, they're glad when they find the grave. Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? The ideal of hedged in is the fact that God had protected him. But here, I don't know that it's so much the ideal of God protecting him. You remember back in chapter 1:10, Satan said the only reason why Job is not cursing you is because you've hedged him in, you've protected him, you've blessed him. And now here you have the same ideal of being hedged in, but now it's like what? Job is still being hedged in, but he can't get out of what he's in now. He can't get out of the pain. He can't get out of the heartache. He can't get out of the depression. He can't get out of all that he's, going through. Whenever you're in that kind of pain and you're hurting, you just want to get out somehow, some way or another. So Job here is saying, I feel in prison, locked in, confined. I don't know how to go, where to go. I don't know how to get there. I'm just, God has now hedged me in, not for protection.
I would have questioned whether or not I'm good with God too. I would have questioned that.
Yeah.
Like I've done something to make him angry.
Mm-hmm.
Something.
Yeah. And that's,
I don't know if I'd want to die at that moment. I would probably be like, maybe I need to figure out what this is first before I die and then get judged for it.
And that's, I think, part of what we're reading about here. His 3 friends are going to try to accuse him of something to try to get him to repent, to get him back in the situation that he's in or was in before it all started. But Job knows he's not done anything wrong. So that's where the struggles goes on. He doesn't know how to get there. So we come on up to the last part of it, and he says these things. My sighing comes instead of my bread. My groanings are poured out like water. The thing that I fear comes upon me. What I dread befalls me. I'm not at ease. I'm not quiet. I have no rest, but trouble comes. And, that's the thing I greatly feared. Notice again how he's very personal here. I greatly feared come upon me. I dreaded what happened to me. I am not at ease. Nor am I quiet. I have no rest. Notice I. He's focusing on him. And we're sitting there thinking, well, maybe he's just too selfish. No, you got to realize that's all he's been focusing on because of all the things he's been through. Let's not blame him. Let's not fuss at him because he seems to be very selfish here, but that's what he's struggling with. My sighing comes before I eat. You know, my troubles, my groanings, and they're becoming more constant. And I get that more than I eat. Think about also, if he was sick, and obviously he was, and running fever, he's not going to feel like eating, right?
I would have been trying to seek out the prophet, wouldn't you? If there was a prophet in that time,
Yeah.
like Nehemiah or whatever, Nehemiah, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So dip yourself 7 times. And
Naaman, yeah, in the water, yeah, something like that. But you don't read any of that here. He says, what? My sighing comes before I eat my bread. He said, my groanings would be roaring. Some other passages would suggest the idea of roaring, the idea of the roar of lions, those who suffer pain. My God, why have you forsaken me? Jesus would cry out on the cross, right? Quoting Psalms 22, verse 1. And again, a lot of times, whenever you're at the point of death, you just feel like your life is ebbing away. You're being poured out. It's like pouring out this water. Yeah. And when it's gone, it's gone.
A sense of relief.
Yeah.
May not be, though.
That's right.
It may not be. It may be a lot worse. Maybe multiplied it by
that's right.
100 times.
And here's the thing I want you to see about this as well. Job has, and he's honest with these people as he's talking about these things. He's honest about what he's going through. We sometimes sit back and say, now, Job, you shouldn't feel that way. But, and Eliphaz is going to, and all these guys are going to try to encourage him to repent of their sins. So that, he said, everything that I feared is coming upon me. Job, it does not mean that Job feared that troubles would come upon him when he is in prosperity, but now he's in adversity. It's fear on top of fear, on top of fear, on top of fear. And it seems that all the fears, everything that he's been fearful of has been accomplished. And he's also sitting there thinking, now think about what's happened. He's lost his family, he's lost his wealth, he's lost his health. What is there left to lose? His wife, in another sense, he's lost her, right? And the fact that she says, curse God and dies, and she is hurting to see him hurting.
Yeah.
And
She probably left him.
I don't know if she left him or not. When you come to the end of the book, you see them having the children again. And I think I told you this once before, when we come to the end of the book, it's some passage that I've never really figured out. The idea that the Lord blessed the latter days of Job more than the beginning. 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels and all. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters. In other words, as you're reading all this whole situation, he gets them, he gets everything back, even more children. But does that really make up for the 10 children he's lost?
Well, I guess God thinks it does.
Yeah.
He put back what he took, or what
True.
he allowed to be taken.
But what has Job learned from all of it?
I don't know. I'd be like, don't make God angry.
Yeah, but again, he knows.
I thought that's what I would probably say.
Yeah, that's what we and you would
especially
think.
in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
I would have definitely thought that.
Yeah. But again, we know that he's not done anything wrong to deserve that, right?
Yeah.
And so now
I'd still be like trying to write my brain.
Oh yeah, I think
like,
I have no doubt.
Something to somebody, did I do something that I didn't think about? Was I callous with somebody when they were reaching out to me or something? Yeah. And all those things would be coming into play, and you would be sitting there thinking about all of that and struggling with all of that. I feel
So,
like it's deserved, probably.
huh?
It's like, somehow it's deserved. I deserve it.
I guess we all think that. We're definitely going to see that his friends think that. Okay. They're going to start, before it's all said and done, they're actually going to accuse him of certain sins. You know, this is what happened. This is the reason why you're suffering this way. You weren't feeding the poor. You weren't clothing the naked. You weren't helping those. And I mean, we're going to actually see them actually say that. And he's sitting back saying, you guys don't have a clue.
Did he feed the poor though? That's
Huh?
a good point.
What?
That's a good point though. Did he feed the poor? You
Yes,
don't know that.
he will say, I did feed. He said, I took care of people.
Yeah.
And he could probably give them time after time after time after time that he did.
Yeah.
So he says, you're trying to come up with something that's not true, because this is what I've done and this is how I've helped people. Widow women would come to me before they'd come to anybody else because they knew I'd take care of them.
Well, I don't have much, but I do feel like it's a blessing. I don't feel like I deserve it.
Right.
I don't have very much, but I do have a roof over my head. I got a car to get me where I need to go. It's nothing spectacular, but
Yeah.
I don't think I deserve that. And if it were up to me, I probably would have ruined everything 100 times over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm hesitant. It's 8:20, and I don't know if I want to go in with this tonight or not. This is just one chapter, and we've seen how Job experienced it. Let's go ahead and start it anyway. All right. So this is where his friends feel like, okay, now that you've spoke to us, we can speak to you. And so in the next 2 chapters, Eliphaz is going to say, you've obviously done something wrong. God would not chasing anybody the way he's chastened you unless they've done something wrong. And they're making the argument right here that starts this. And so it's Eliphaz, the oldest one, starts coming into play. He's the one that's answering, and he says, okay, if I attempt a word with you, will you become weary? If I say some things to you that's going to hurt, are you going to be hurt even that much more? I'm going to tell you some truth about some things. And he's saying, so I want to say these things to you. I'm saying it because I love you. Sometimes we all need to say those harsh things or those hard things to people when they can't see their own
I feel
failings.
I need to do that more than often.
Right? Hey, I understand that too.
I'm a big fan of the truth, like even if it hurts.
Yeah. And that's we've got to be careful with that too, don't we?
I don't have a lot of friends because of it.
Well, yeah.
It doesn't really, to me, like I consider it more important than until
Right. So, as you look at all of this, he says, can we try to talk with you? Will you be grieved if you listen to it? Sometimes we all have those times whenever we say things that do hurt, and Eliphaz is saying, if I try this, are you going to be upset with me for trying? Okay.
Yeah.
So notice he says, who can withhold himself from speaking? Who can withhold himself? You have instructed many, and you have instructed, or you have had what? You have helped the weak hands, right? Isaiah 35, strengthen the weak hands, make firm the feeble knees. Isaiah 35 at verse 3. So you, Job, have helped others. You have instructed many. You have built up others. So if we try to give you some words, if we try to encourage you in some way or another to help you to understand what you need to be doing, will you be willing to listen to what we have to say? Will you be impatient with us as well? we've listened to you patiently. As I'm trying to help you to see what you've done wrong, would you be patient with us enough to listen? You know, your words have helped many people. Let our words help you.
So this guy's on the brink of suicide. I don't think he's probably maybe not. I'd be a little delicate when I said that.
That's exactly right.
I probably wouldn't, but you know, I mean, in
Yeah,
sense,
and I think that's what he's doing.
I would try.
I think that's exactly what he's doing. He says,
don't kill yourself.
Don't kill yourself. We've got to say some things that may hurt. And let's think about it this way. You know, in the battle of life, we need encouragement. We all need encouragement. We get wore out, we get tired. And so that's
stale.
Yeah.
Stale.
Yeah. Yeah. And so think about it in that respect. In Job 4, verse 4, your words have upheld him who was stumbling. You have helped others. Now we're trying to encourage you. We're trying to help you. We pray that you will listen to us. And he says, you know what? That's what we're trying to do. That's all we're trying to do, is trying to help you. So will you listen? Will you become weary? Will you take this in the way we intended? Okay.
Yeah.
And Job is like, okay. You know, whenever somebody starts off a speech like that, you're kind of like, all righty. What are you about to say that I'm not sure I want to listen to? You know, we've all heard that. We've all heard those kind of situations. So, you know, the right words spoken at the right time with the right motive can make a difference in other people's lives. So sometimes we can encourage the weak.
I would have told him to stop feeling sorry for himself.
You would have told him what?
Stop feeling sorry for himself. I would have straight up said that.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm gonna go now. like a pity party. Like some people, like they get in that. It's like it's really uncomfortable. Like when you're like, if someone was saying all this in front of me, I would be like,
We got to look at a person's heart.
I feel like you can't feel sorry for yourself. Period.
Well,
in your own self. You know what I mean? Like I try not to do that. And like, I mean, I have circumstances. But you know, the funny thing is, you can always look at it like someone else is way worse.
That's exactly right.
But the guy who's like has no arms and no legs.
Mm-hmm.
You see that guy is a Christian up there. I don't know what his doctor is like, but he's a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And he's up there preaching, and they have to wheel him out there or something. He's got no arms, no legs, and he's talking about Jesus on the stage. You know what I'm saying? That's a pretty good disposition.
It is. But we've got to be also very careful, because again, like Eliphaz and Bildad and Zophar, we don't know what they are mentally. And sometimes we may push them over the edge.
You tell me. Oh, you mean like by saying don't feel sorry for yourself?
Yeah, and things along that line. And that's,
well, I mean, in today's society, what we would do if some guy was talking like that, we'd be like, well, we need to go take you to talk to somebody. That's what we need to do. Maybe get you some medication, get you some Xanax.
That's what they would probably say. But there was no doctors, there was no Xanax, there was no of that other stuff now. So for you to get through this, you need to look at this from our viewpoint as well as your own viewpoint, and realize, you know, we know that you have gone through a lot, but we're here to try to help you. But Job is still now so broken that all that they're doing is just adding, if we could use the old saying, insult to injury. Right.
He's venting, and it's understandable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a certain point, like where venting is like takes it too far.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like,
and we're going to see Job actually go too far with this and blame God for some of it. We're going to see Job do that. And that's when I think God steps in. And what's also interesting, God steps in at the end of the book, and he says to Job, and he starts giving, and what he does is it's kind of like a machine gun. He's just asking questions. Were you there when I created the world?
Yeah.
Were you there when are you there when the deer gives us birth on the mountain? Are you there? And he's asking all these questions of Job and saying, in essence, Job, whenever you are in charge of the world, then you can sit back and judge me for what I have done. But you're not in charge of the world. I'm still God.
Yeah.
And
It's a difficult position to be in.
That's right. So, as I said, it's something that we've got to be very careful about, because again, we don't always know how fragile somebody is.
The point is, like, I guess he's going to vent or whatnot, and then that's fine. Get it off your chest,
Mm-hmm.
And then the friends are going to be like, well, we got to come up with a solution to this. We can't sit here forever.
That's right.
We can't sit. We got families too.
Right.
We've got stuff going on.
Right.
And we're here for you, but that's going to eventually not be the case.
But also think about this. We can't solve everybody else's problems.
I know, but that's what I'm saying, though. Your first inclination, just like we said, it's going to be like, well, what's going on? Tell me about that situation.
Mm-hmm.
So you were out in the field, and then everybody died. That doesn't make sense. Something's not. You know what I mean? You would have been like, if you were just a spectator, you'd be like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute. You're telling us the whole story, Joe?
And that could very well possibly be the case as well.
But yeah, you're going to try to solve it. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm. And more often than not, our solution
does more damage than good. That's
exactly right. And I think that's what he's trying to get across. And I think that's what we need to be getting across too, is the fact that, we don't know what a person's going through until we actually see them. And sometimes we can push them the wrong way and they go over the edge. And that's what's going to happen here. They're going to make assumptions about Job's sins and say, you deserve this.
Yeah.
And Job's saying, you guys don't have a clue what you're talking about. So this is, as I said,
that might have been common in the time period.
It's still common today.
What I'm saying is, like, back then, I mean, as far as religious people, they might have thought that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I told you before, when he said to Jesus, I think it was Peter or one of them, says, well, is this man struck down with this illness because of his sins? And that was the case sometimes.
Right.
And he says, no, this man had this illness so they could show the power of God.
Right. So
that just basically just threw up a big question mark. Like, okay, well, I thought you were going to make sense of it, but you made even less sense than I thought. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, he had a question about it, and then it drew him even further into mystery. Like,
mm-hmm. Okay. But it also drew them further. Okay, there's a lot more going on behind the scenes than I know about.
Well, that's the point.
And that's the point of Job. That's the point of what Jesus was trying to get people to do. That's the point of what we need to always remember. Sometimes Tommy gets God in a box and expects God to act certain ways in certain circumstances. And then when something doesn't, or something happens that doesn't fit Tommy's box, that means either A, I think God's just left me and I'm going to blame him from here on out, or B, there's some other aspects about God that I've not really considered.
I think that, just like you said, it's really complicated. And then, well, I mean, there's the world. Mm-hmm. That's one thing. And God is not. A lot of people will say, okay, well, that's the guys who say it's God is sovereign and he did everything. He's doing everything. No, that's not true. And God lets a lot of people do a lot of things and doesn't deal with it necessarily at that moment.
That's right.
So sometimes the world is affecting you, even as a Christian. You might be a faithful Christian, mm-hmm. and the world is affecting you. And then sometimes it may be something you got to learn. There's a lot of possibilities there, but the point is, like, it could be a lot of things. I don't think God treats any one person the same. I don't believe that.
I don't think he does either.
I think that different situations and different things going on with different people all over the world. And if God has control over even the people that don't believe in it, don't care about it. I mean, he treats them definitely different than he treats us. I'm pretty sure about that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's like that. That's one of those things. It's like, you can't look at it like, I guess I could have looked at, I wasn't like fully a Christian at that time when my mom died, but like I guess I could have looked at it like that, but I never really thought like, well, God did this to me or something like
Right.
that. I don't know, but those are things that like I just don't let it sit there.
Right.
I don't let those kind of thoughts. So like if it ever did enter my mind, I feel like the devil does try to tempt me that way, but it never works.
Right.
Because it doesn't stick. I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna give place to that.
But for you, that's what happens. This
Yeah.
other person over here is going to stick, and it's
Yeah.
going to eat them alive.
Well, but I'm saying that's the type of thing I feel like that's one of those situations where you would get struck down with something.
Right.
I mean, there's always that thought. People don't think that happens anymore, but there's always that thought that you might very well, your heart might stop.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hear about that? Like how many people every day the heart stops? That's like the number one cause of death.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's heart just stops. And that can't be explained. They can explain it with science or anything. People are having a heart attack in their 30s now.
Yeah, I know.
In their 20s.
I know.
It could be living. It could be that.
It could be the stress of living.
But I mean,
and especially right now with all the other stuff going on behind the scenes, you know.
I'm just saying that it's quite possible. Like you don't get too big, you know. What my grandfather used to say, don't get too big for your britches.
Britches, that's right.
And you're like, you know,
That's right.
If you start shouting at God, like say Jim Carrey in that movie or something like that, you know, you might just get struck down by lightning or something.
That's right.
You never know.
That's right.
You know.
As we look at this, going back here to chapter 4, he says, if I say something, are you going to be able to hear it? But I've got to say this. And so now verses 5 through 11, notice what he says say. All right. He says, now you have upheld him who was stumbling. You have strengthened weak hands. You have instructed many. You have strengthened the feeble knees. But now it comes upon you. So one commentator says, you can give it, but you can't receive it. You can't get it. You don't take it. You tell everybody else how to handle their trials, but when trials come to your life, you're not practicing what you preach.
Yeah.
And so he will emphasize this idea. It comes on you. You're weary. It touches you. You're troubled. Your reverence is your confidence in the integrity of your ways, or that's your hope. You know, you're saying in essence that you've lived such a godly life that you have nothing to fear.
He sounds a lot like Satan.
Well, sometimes Satan does use.
I'm saying though, he sounds a lot like Satan. What Satan just said.
Yeah, earlier, right?
Yeah.
And so again, you know, if Job is really living a godly life, then he has nothing to fear because God always blesses the righteous and judges the wicked, right? There's that assumption. God is always blessing the righteous and judging the wicked.
So are they looking at him like a gift fairy too?
Huh?
Are they looking at him like a gift fairy too as well then? And that's what it sounds like. That, oh, God just gives everybody that's good things. And
everybody that's bad gets the bad things.
Like you were talking about before, like how people think about being a Christian, that God's going to give you all this stuff.
And that's kind of it. That's the way a lot of people think. You do what's right, God's going to bless you. But you don't do what's right, he's going to get you.
Jesus said, well,
right?
They're going to persecute you.
Right?
They're going to persecute you.
They're going to persecute Christians, kill Christians, right?
They're doing it.
So that's kind of like, that goes against everything that we've been looking at, right? You know, most people will agree with the idea that God will ultimately bless the righteous and judge the wicked, but that's not really here. He's talking about right now. You know, think about the idea.
Is there any other instances where we can, I know you're talking about Jeremiah, but like any other instances where, say, someone got struck down with all this type of stuff in the same type of fashion?
Think about David and some of the things he went through.
With the child?
No,
but he kind of brought it down on himself, I was thinking.
Well, some of it did.
The child. I was thinking the child was because that was dark.
Right.
Like I liked David, and I looked at that story when I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And when I read it again, when I first became a Christian, I was like, "That is dark." He killed this guy, and he fooled him and he went with his wife.
Psalms 37 suggests the idea of a little bit of what we're talking about. And you got to remember this is part of the reason why Job is part of the Psalms and the writings. He talks about don't fret because of evildoers or envious of the workers of iniquity. They shall be cut down like the grass and withers the green herb. There's his assumption, right? If you're doing evil, you're going to be cut down.
Yeah.
And in a sense, there's truth to that, right?
But maybe later.
But it's going to be later. But, a lot of times we expect that judgment to come right then, right now. If that's the case, well, we wouldn't even be here to discuss this. As we think about it, I'm not saying that you and I are wicked. I'm saying that the world would be over with. Yeah, that's right.
That says that in Revelation too.
That's right.
I've given them time to repent, but it did not repent.
So he says in verse 3, Psalms 37, trust in the Lord, do good, dwell in the land, delight yourself, commit your way to the Lord, he shall bring it to pass. Feast, rest in the Lord, verse 7. Cease from anger, forsake wrath, do not fret, it only causes harm. The man of the wicked, because of the man who brings wicked schemes to pass, don't fret because of him. Evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait on the Lord shall inherit the earth. The wicked plots against the just, gnashes at him with his teeth, and the Lord laughs at him. This whole chapter 37, is the calamity of the wicked. And what's happening here? The wicked borrows and does not repay. The wicked shall perish.
Well, that's talking about hell, probably. That's probably talking about hell. Maybe.
But I think in a lot of this, if you read the context of everything here, I think he's talking about in this life, the wicked shall perish and die because of it. The wicked watches the righteous and seeks to slay him, but the Lord does not leave him in his hand nor condemn him when he's judged. So the idea of this whole psalm is emphasizing the idea, if you're living a godly life, you will not, the assumption's made, if you're living a godly life, then you will be blessed. I have been young and now I'm old, yet I've not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his descendants begging bread. He's ever merciful and lends, and his descendants are blessed. But here we have a situation with Job with what? He hasn't, the blessings have not been there.
Oh.
So they were there before, but now all of a sudden he's lost everything.
But do you see it that way? I don't really look for blessings like that. Maybe if I'm trying to do something in God, maybe I might be like, hey, God, this is for you. Could you throw me a bone over here?
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
And that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Otherwise, I don't think it's going to give me a lot of money.
No, I don't
in fact, I think that if I go play the lottery, I know that I'll go lose it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But again, think about the idea that, David was talking about this, Asaph was talking about it in Psalm 73, Jeremiah, there are times when God's people are going to have to suffer. And I think that's it. So let's stop there. Okay. We'll pick up with this. You get the beginning of the idea of how Eliphaz saying, I'm going to tell you some things. You have upheld them, but now it's all happening to you. So let me remind you, whoever perished being innocent, Job, you must have done something wrong for you to be suffering. Where were the upright ever cut off? Well, let me give you examples after examples after examples. Those who plow iniquity and sow trouble reap the same. So Job, what's happening? You deserve this.
Some sense too, though, you might even think like, well, you've done it to yourself, maybe not even God, like you just did it to yourself.
Right.
Something about your ways, like not necessarily God's judgment too, but like if someone's life is in like the gutter and you'd be like, well, what's going on in your life? Why is your life in this circumstance? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we have that assumption. And that's exactly. And so that's what he's trying to say here. You have been receiving the blessings of God all your life, and now all of a sudden you're suffering. You must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where he's going to really So begin there in chapter 4, read through chapter 4, 5, 6. We'll see how far along we get. We're going to see Job fussing, or, giving the answer. And this is what it's going to be like. Eliphaz is going to say something. Job is going to answer him. Then Bildad is going to say something. And again, before it's over with, they're going to tell him, you just need to repent.
Yeah.
And so that's where it all goes down to. So they have some series of speeches. Job comes up with a long thing, and then again,
Why did they never offer a goat or whatever for him? They should have did that maybe. Right?
Yeah, maybe.
They could have. Does it say that they prayed for him?
I don't remember them saying that.
That would have been probably a good thing to do.
But at the same time, they may very well have. We just don't have a record of it. And the thing is we really won't know. So study this again. Read through. We'll try to get through. Let's see. We're at chapter 4 now, right? Try to go through 10 chapters. I know we're not going to cover it all, but try to go through 4 to 14.
Okay.
That might be a good. Wait a minute. Yeah, 4 through 14. That'll get us through another one of Job's speeches. Okay.
Okay.
And we'll pick up there. All righty.
All right.
Josh, I appreciate you, brother.
Yes,
Really
say a
do.
prayer for me for the Greek.
You'll do fine. You'll do fine. Just hang in there with it.
I'm gonna send an email telling them that I'm struggling a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm gonna go over it. We'll go some outside teaching, I guess, or something. I can't afford to go sign up for that guy's program, but I might just watch videos. His program's kind of expensive.